Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The American public is excluded from the essential energy discussion which we need to be having. The justification for excluding the American people is that they lack formal climate credentials. But for some reason, every journalist, politician, and 17-year-old high school truant is considered a climate expert. The Washington Post editorial board printed this over the weekend. The global heat wave should be a warning for the future. In Yosemite National Park's famed Mariposa Grove, giant sequoias have grown for millennia. This month they were threatened by a nearby wildfire. That is just one of many dramatic weather events taking place around the country and world. Western Europe is experiencing extreme heat waves. Italy has prolonged heat and drought. Officials attributed the deaths of 11 people to climate change. In China, at least 86 cities released heat alerts. And then they go on and say a group of scientists blame these weather events on human-caused climate change. The same hysteria goes on just about every summer, as the Morning Oregonian reported this week in 1906. Whenever an unusually hot season is upon us, sweltering humanity talks about the changes in climate and shakes its head in a foreboding fashion. The Washington Post claims there's a global heat wave, but that simply isn't true. They are having a heat wave in Western Europe, but other areas of the Earth are very cold. For the Earth as a whole, the temperature is 0.2 degrees above the 1979 to 2000 average. 0.2 degrees is not something most people would get hysterical about. It is hot in England today, but Australia's been cold for weeks. Every summer there's heat waves. There's been heat waves in the past, there will be heat waves in the future. It's not a warning about anything, it's just the normal weather. Now let's look at the Washington Post claim that giant sequoias in California are threatened by a forest fire. Had the Washington Post editorial staff bothered to go to the National Park Service website, they would have known that forest fires are essential to the survival of giant sequoia trees. What threatens the trees is man-made fire suppression by government agencies. When forest fires are suppressed by humans, the forest floor gets thick with fuel. In 2016 and 2018, the New York Times complained that fire suppression was making the California forests a very dangerous place. If you have too much fuel on the ground, then when you do get a forest fire, it's going to be a lot more destructive. 30 years ago, the New York Times reported that Western landscapes in the pre-settlement era were very smoky places. They said large forest fires occurred in California at least twice a decade and were linked to droughts caused by La Nina events. And La Nina is exactly what's been going on in California for the last 2 years. The Washington Post editorial staff took some ordinary weather events and tried to attribute them to the burning of fossil fuels. Now let's look at the worst July heat waves in the United States. The hottest July afternoon temperatures in the United States occurred in 1936, 1901, 1934, 1930, and 1931. This graph shows the July percent of days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see that the last really hot July in the United States occurred in 1980. This graph shows the percent of United States Historical Climatology Network stations which reached 95 degrees Fahrenheit or 35 degrees Celsius sometime during July. The peak coverage of hot July weather occurred in 1931, and this year has been close to a record low so far. Journalists who think the weather is hotter now than it was during the 1930s probably need to repeat elementary school. July 1936 was the hottest July on record. Every state was over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. 43 states were over 100 degrees, 23 states were over 110 degrees, and 4 states were over 120 degrees. North Dakota reached 121 degrees Fahrenheit during July 1936. Weather this hot around the United States is incomprehensible now. During July 1980, every state was over 90 degrees. 43 states were over 100 degrees, 9 states were over 110 degrees, and 1 state was over 120 degrees. During July 1934, every state was over 90 degrees, 41 states were over 100 degrees, and 24 states were over 110 degrees. During July 1901, every state was over 90 degrees, 42 states were over 100 degrees, and 14 states were over 110 degrees. During July 1954, 46 states were over 90 degrees, 39 states were over 100 degrees, 12 states were over 110 degrees, and Kansas reached 120. During July 1930, 47 states were over 90 degrees, 42 were over 100 degrees, and 17 states were over 110 degrees. If the Washington Post editorial board actually read their own paper, they would have known that the summer of 1930 was the hottest on record in Washington, D.C. This article was written in the Washington Post by Kevin Ambrose in 2010. He is one of the co-authors of the book Washington Weather. The other co-author was Andy Weiss, who passed away a few years ago. He was a friend and a regular contributor to my blog. The hottest day on record in Washington, D.C. was July 20th, 1930, when they reached 106 degrees. From July 19th to July 26, 1930, Washington, D.C. reached 100 degrees 6 times. The Washington Post editorial staff appears to understand nothing about climate, science, or weather. But they're more than happy to repeatedly spout their uneducated opinions while censoring everybody who actually knows what they're talking about. Let's finish this up with the 5th hottest July in the United States, 1931. The Los Angeles Times reported, "World suffers freak weather. America has drought and heat waves." During the summer of 1931, China had the deadliest flood on record, which killed as many as 5 million people. The heat and drought in the United States during the summer of 1931 was causing people to starve in multiple states. And this came 1 year after Washington, D.C.'s hottest summer of 1930. The Washington Post is spreading complete nonsense, trying to attribute ordinary weather events to the burning of fossil fuels. Their owner, Jeff Bezos, also owns Amazon and makes lots of money when people are locked up in their homes. Bezos and his buddy Bill Gates also plan to accumulate huge amounts of wealth by pushing fake meat. So demonizing the meat industry through superstitions about climate change is worth a lot of money to them. Mark Twain said, "I'm personally acquainted with hundreds of journalists, and the opinion of the majority of them would not be worth tuppence in private. But when they speak in print, it is the newspaper that is talking, and then their utterances shake the community like the thunders of prophecy." And he described the journalists as pygmy scribes. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on these ignorant scamsters in the press for the past 14 years. You can visit Toto, Kyrie Caesar, Toki and Upla on the web at realclimatescience.com.